Do you have a phone?
No.
Zero two.
Five. And Sunny.
She told me a joke. You and she.
So here's how to work.
Yeah.
We'll submit it, and then y'all will be introduced. Y'all are the panel. Sounds good?
Unfortunately, about Christian.
I'll let you know when we are good. I'll give you a thumbs up and then we can start.
Used to be, but they said we send few.
Yeah.
In fact, the most famous one is
Yeah.
he hanged the whole but again, like that was maybe no
Okay. We're good. And make sure to
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're starting. Hello, my name is Elias Martinez, and welcome to South Asia Deconstructed, a speaker series hosted by the Indigo Collective at the University of Texas at Austin. First, I'd like to say that although this event is being hosted or being organized by the University of Texas, it is in no way representative of the administration or its policies in any way. The Indigo Collective is a student organization. Any of the views or opinions expressed here are that of a student group or our guest speakers. Today we have a special Bengali panel. I'd also like to, sorry, I'm out of it. I'd like to thank our sponsors. There are a lot of them, so please bear with me. From the College of Liberal Arts, I'd like to thank the Center for Asian American Studies. I'd also like to thank the South Asia Institute, especially them, as we're being hosted by their panelists. I'd like to thank the LGBTQ Studies, the Department of History, the Liberal Arts Honors Program, the Plan 2 Honors Program from the Moody College of Communications, the Center for Entertainment and Media Industries, Communication Studies from the Texas McCombs Business School, the Hartley Institute for Entrepreneurial Studies, and lastly, the UT Student Coalition for Caste Abolition. With that being said, please welcome Dr. Ahmed Shamim. His work focuses on language pedagogy, phonology, and morphology and grammar. He has a PhD in linguistics and published 2 books on language. I'd also like to welcome Ena Ganguly, who has their work focuses on collective memory, grief, healing, and state violence. Their work has been hosted at the Pritzker Arts and Letters in Algo, and they've won the Breakwater Review 2024 Prezov Poetry Prize. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Anuva, your moderator for this panel. And just to start us off, could you both tell us a little bit about yourselves, what work you do, and yeah.
Yeah, my name is Ahmed Shamim, but you can call me Shamim. I used to teach here Bengali. I taught here almost 9 years, and last year I moved to Cornell. I took up an admin job there. My wife, Razima, teaches Bengali there. We have a kid, 12, and that's the reason for me to go there. But I loved here, and while teaching Bengali, I met Ena, and also Amu. Yeah.
My name is Ena. Pronouns are she, they. I graduated from UT. I actually studied government and humanities while I was here, and I minored in Asian studies. So I was very much a big fan of the South Asia Institute while I was here, and course, meeting Shamim through that program. And right now, I work in communications, but as a creative, I do a lot of work in poetry mostly, but I'm trying to write more of like creative nonfiction and also speculative fiction, so that's more like in the realm of fantasy, horror, sci-fi even. So yeah, just trying to be a creative out in the world, but also pay my bills.
Both of your work sounds so interesting, and I'd really love to know how South Asian identity might have played into that, if it did.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as a writer, we don't really see a lot of South Asian identities or storylines, especially in poetry or speculative fiction that is in English. And, you know, I can think of like maybe a handful of Bengali writers that I really love who write in English, like Chumpa Lahiri or Arundhati Roy. And so, like, for me, it was really important to see, especially Bengali women, in a romantic way, in a way that is sensual, in a way that is brave and strong, and not just about like shouldering the burdens of family, which is oftentimes the limit of like what we see in South Asian representation, especially like for women, are kind of limited to the domestic space. But I think my work is not really trying to like support that sort of narrative, where I think we should look outside of that, and where we thrive outside of the domestic space.
Makes a lot of sense, and that sounds really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me it was a learning experience. Like I've been like 20 years now. I'm teaching Bengali in Bangladesh, also here. So most part it was like grammar and it's just to follow the texts and everything. But when I started teaching a CLS program, like a government program that every country has, like some critical languages, so Bangladesh has one. So then I was teaching undergrads and grad students from here. They go there and for the summer. And then there are lots of training about how to be inclusive in your pedagogy, and how to include the identities and also social justice. So new things it was introduced through trainings, through workshops, and it opened up a new world to me. And I was like, oh, why didn't I know this? It all makes sense. So yes, I taught myself, and also I did not leave any opportunity, like I didn't miss any opportunity to go to this kind of workshops and and learn myself, educate myself, and also forget things that was in my head. So unlearn that process. And I came here, and that helped. I fit right in. I saw many people coming from different backgrounds, and I tried to create a home, like classroom, like a safe space for my students. And I was loved, and that's why I'm here. One day I got an email from Amu, and it's like, and she was doing independent study with me for one semester, and I liked her work, and I was reading. I also learned many things about critical understanding of the Dalit literature that she was doing, and and how the intersectionality come into play. And she came up with something called identity stacking, like all your identities, like one, if you have multiple identities and all the identities actually gets repressed in this society, then there is not one identity that is like you can breathe, so that gets stacked on one on other. That actually really, like, it was like, for me it was like, wow, she came up with this very critical thing of her own, but I was there to just facilitate. So yeah, then I got this email that, hey Shamim, do you want to come and join and have a panel with your former colleague and student Enakshi? And I was like, yes, that's how I'm here.
That's so good to hear. Yeah, so I think I'm hearing a lot of how language is kind of a tool for exploring identity and exploring society for both of you. And I would really love to hear more about language specifically, how it's kind of played a role in how you understand the world. And I know Bengali specifically is a very, it's a language we hold close to our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could just tell us a bit about that.
I'm sure.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's such a big question. I think we could spend a whole semester on it. Maybe Shamim should teach that class. But you know, Bengali has a very unique history. Bengal used to be one, as we know. It was partitioned officially and permanently in 1947, but British colonizers tried to partition us a few times. And so like our language has always been the one thing that unites us, beyond religion, beyond caste, beyond other markers. And so like for me, I remember when I was young, so I was born in India, and I came here when I was around 6. And I remember I would go to school, and when I would come back from school, I would be speaking English to my mom, and she would be like, nope, you're not speaking English at home. And that was always like a big, I think, line she had drawn for me, which helped me kind of preserve my identity and not, because assimilation is not always the same thing as integration, and assimilating can oftentimes force us to kind of forego our roots and where we come from. And so I think she always wanted me to retain my identity as a Bengali, Indian Bengali person. And so that language was really important for me growing up, so I could have I could have that consciousness of like, yes, I'm American, yes, I'm going to school with people who speak English, but at home I can still be Bengali, and that's not something I have to be ashamed of. It's something that I can be proud of. And even though I can't really write poetry in Bangla, the songs, the music, the movies, the books, the poetry, like all of it in Bangla, it brings me a lot of pride, and so like I feel very inspired. And I think a lot of South Asian writers feel inspired by the languages of their family's origin, even if they can't necessarily write or read it.
Yeah, I would add to is that language is always, for Bengalis, like language and identity was always important, because that's how Bengal became, like part of Bengal became today's Bangladesh, the country, because it was a part of Pakistan, and Pakistani regime wanted to impose Urdu over Bengalis, that the only state language will be, the only state language should be Urdu, and Urdu only. So that's sparked a movement, and Bengalis said that we will not be Pakistanis anymore, then we'll create our own country. So language is that important. And also with the Indigo initiative, I can remember that this March, right, in 1859, March, there was Indigo Revolt. They were forced to plant, grow indigo. So this month is the month that they revolted against the planters. So by extension, the jamindars, and by extension, the colonial government.
This was in Bangladesh?
Yeah, it's in Bengal.
Wow.
So identity and language is part and parcel of that land, and also how they want to grow, and grow in terms of culture. Also, they want to grow what they want to grow in their fields. They wanted to have that agency. what was taken from them by the colonial government. So that like cascaded, and it's like an effect that created today's Bangladesh. So in terms of, I would say, language, now that one thing happens is like if you want to create your own identity through something like language, you should also be aware that at one point when you have your own state, don't impose your language to other minority languages, right? That we always forget. And I also, I did my PhD project in describing a minority language in Bangladesh, which is actually endangered because of the dominant Bengali language now. So that was part of my education and also my PhD project, that I want to create awareness that yes, once you were the victim of somebody else's policies, language policies, now you have your own land and your language is dominant. Please also look back your past and grow some sensibility to include the other small languages that you have in your country.
That's actually a very important point that you touched on. Thank you. And yeah, so I kind of want to return to what Dr. Shamim was talking about earlier about stacking identities and how that can be a whole different intersectional way of navigating this place and these things the society we're in. And I really want to ask about how you might have experienced that, and if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I feel like we have a rotation going, so hopefully this is good. Stacking identities, I think that's such an important, I don't know where Amu is, but I think that's a really important way to approach life and like kind of the nuances and like intricacies of living in this country and in any country in the world. But I mean, I know for me, like, because I grew up in India for the first 6 years of my life and then coming here, I felt very confused because I didn't know, like I had seen so many things in India, and then America just felt such a stark difference to that for good and bad. And then, you know, when I got older and in high school, kind of coming into my sense of being like a young queer kid and, you know, feeling very awkward and just feeling like that sense of being alien. I mean, I was literally a resident alien because the government said I was, but also like, yeah, just feeling like a sense of not belonging, and that kind of stuck with me, and it's still with me. Like wherever I go, I always feel like I'm on the outside looking in, and that's something that I've realized isn't a weakness, it's a superpower, and it's a point of power when we can connect with one another on like the ways that we are unique, on the ways that we are different. Not in like a trauma bond kind of way, like we've both been through some things, but like that our differences make us really special, and it contributes to our art, it contributes to the way we approach life and the way we love and think about things. But yeah, I will say that being at UT, I took a lot of courses by Dr. Chatterjee, who I was talking to you about earlier. She taught a lot of courses about like colonial India and how, South Asians didn't always live the way that we do today. Even culturally, how there's an economics of culture. And to me, what that signified was that there are things that we may hold generationally that we don't always, that we can't always like actively realize. They are essentially things that we have to kind of look for and dig for. And I felt that at UT, where I had to kind of continuously dig for a sense of connection between me and other South Asian people and continuously find the truths about ourselves beyond like the stereotypes of being South Asian. And that to me helped me feel like I belonged in the South Asian community as a queer person, because queerness was always kind of seen as a taboo subject in the South Asian community. But when I realized like these are things that have been, our culture has been shaped by colonialism, it has been shaped by the economy of colonialism, and some things had to be considered taboo so that we could like survive what we did. I hope that's not like me rambling, but you know, I feel like once I understood some of those things, and once a lot of our current culture was contextualized within history, I felt a lot more comfortable in my skin as someone who is both South Asian, both woman and queer, both an immigrant and an American. It made more sense to me that yes, as a community, we are incredibly diverse, and that is our strength. That's what we can lean on. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, I think you articulated that beautifully. And Dr. Shamim, I would like to invite you to talk about your own experience, but also kind of what you learned through your PhD thesis about like how this stacking of identities of language minorities or general minorities in Bangladesh might have happened, and what you kind of saw of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, since it was a new experience for me, new learning thing for me, it was not always clear when I was doing my PhD. But in the middle of my PhD, I got this job and came here and met wonderful people like you and learned about this. To be honest, I would like tell you that I was not very comfortable with the word identity politics coming from left organization in Bangladesh. I would thank Ena for saying that, okay, all of our things, like even our movements were shaped by colonialism. Even the left is shaped by colonialism. Like we are colonial left. We think that no, identities do not matter. Yeah, only one matter is like the poor class, the proletariat. That's the universal class. If we emancipate that class, everyone will be emancipated. So that's a colonial leftism, right? They cannot include the identity politics and other politics. So also our nationalism is also shaped by colonialism, that one language, one country. No, it shouldn't be that way. But colonialism taught us, made us think that way. That, okay, Spanish speakers will have Spain, and French speakers will have France, English speakers will have England, right? That's their nice and beautiful idea of state. Like Bengalis will have Bengal. Forget about all other 40 other languages that live in Bangladesh, right? So that's how they get crushed, right? But what we are thinking, we are doing like, oh, we are nationalists, we are progressive, we are leftists, we are progressives. So in the name of progressism, right? What progress we are doing? Our idea of progress is so colonialized, right? Thank you for bringing that up. We don't stop and think that, no, this is not progress. Just going fast towards the downhill is not progress, right? You might be slow in the process, but you need to include all other identities, all other languages that exist around you, right? Without their emancipation, you cannot think of emancipating your plight or yourself, right? So there, I think Amu's work was very important for my education. If it's not that we are saving the Dalits, right, or the ones who are oppressed, but can we imagine or reimagine that identities are universal identities that are being repressed. And through the emancipation of those identities, the stacked ones, right, we ourselves emancipate ourselves, right? It's a Marxist thinking, but it's like decolonizing Marxism from the identity perspective. That I learned from my students, my colleagues, especially Amu's work. Yeah, thank you.
That was a really interesting perspective that I don't know if I've thought about before. So thank you for explaining that. And now I want to bring this a little bit closer to home because we've been talking a lot about South Asian identity broadly, but I think it's an interesting intersection to be at because there's an identity within that. Like today we are a Bengali speaker panel, and I really want to know how Bengali identity is what it is to you and how you navigate that within the South Asian diaspora and the broader South Asian community and identity. And yeah, how do you think that's represented right now? If you'd like to start.
Yeah. You're not holding back. I mean, I think, will this stay? Okay, no, it's a little loose.
Yeah. I can hold that for you.
Are you sure? Yeah. Okay. Let me know if your arm gets tired. That's a lot. I mean, I think being from India, and I also am like second or third generation from Bihar. My stepmom gets really mad when I say I'm Bihari. She's like, nah, tumi Bangali. That's a whole other thing. But I was born in Patna, so I actually would be considered Hindustani by Kolkata Bengalis, especially because there's a very you're born and raised in Kolkata, then you're Bengali, and that speaks to a hierarchy of culture within the Bengali community, which is very problematic. But I was raised in Patna, Bihar, for the first 5 to 6 years of my life, and then I came here, and I think being Bengali to me, it is about the language, but it also feels like being from India, it feels deeply ancestral. And I think a lot about my great grandma, my dad's mom's mom, who was from Dhaka, was from a small town close to Dhaka. And my daddy actually remembers taking a little noko, a little boat from West Bengal to her mother's hometown, and just meeting her dad and how they spoke very different Bangla from them and how it was really hard to understand him. Those are all stories that I think we want to erase because it makes us uncomfortable that we aren't fully Ghoti Bengali, that we have this really nuanced, diverse heritage of being from Bangladesh, present-day Bangladesh, and from West Bengal, and even beyond that. And Bengal itself is an incredibly diverse state. I mean, if you look at the history of Bengal, we have been influenced by so many different cultures. But I will say, I think a lot about my great-grandma because of her spirituality and her faith, which was very secret, and she didn't share it with everyone. And I think that speaks a lot to kind of how we should have gate kept our culture. I love that she gate kept her spirituality, because I think what we're seeing today in India is this kind of homogenizing of culture through religion, through language, like Shamim was saying, through caste. And in West Bengal specifically, I've seen a lot of homogenizing of Hinduism from people who are Hindu in West Bengal. And it's uncomfortable for me because I think we forget we have roots that are different, and Hinduism is very regional. It in Bengal has been historically, tied in with Shakta, Tantra, sex, even SECTS, and even Buddhism. And so we're not really seeing that as much. Even my aunts are doing Krishna Bhakt and stuff, and I'm what? I'm so confused as someone who's not there. But, you know, that's kind of the influence that's coming through Bengal now. And I've been thinking a lot about caste, especially like in relation to race. And I am not the first or the last to like make those connections. But, you know, a lot of like caste abolitionists, like Dalit women specifically, argue that like caste is essentially, you know, there's a caste system in America and then there's the caste system in India and South Asia. And I just think a lot about how like what white people had to give up to like have the privilege of being white. And corresponding to that, I think about what did upper caste people have to give up in order to be upper caste, to be Savarna. And I feel like I've been seeing that in real time with my own family. Like we've had to kind of give up our own, not had to, but wanted to, give up our own kind of cultural nuances and like our heritage in exchange for this privilege or this power, which is, it's sad to see. And sometimes I wish I could have like an honest and frank conversation, but they're like so deep into that it's hard to like, it's like fish in water. Like they don't know that they're swimming in it, and that's the culture that they're kind of buying into. But yeah, I think about that a lot as a Bengali person. It's like, how do we retain our identity? How do we gatekeep that? And like look out for each other versus sell out so that we can have some modicum of power in our community.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very interesting way to think about it. And I would love to get your take on this.
Yeah, so about identities, I'm still learning that I'm more comfortable when the identities are, like the boundaries are porous. Like if it is like opaque to each other and we are in a box, that I do not like feel comfortable with. Like there is this ongoing debate that can Bengalis be Muslims, and like can Muslims be Bengalis? Like the Hindu Bengalis are better, or the Bengalis who speaks proper Bangla are better than the Bengalis who speaks a regional Bangla. So I think all this, I will not say that all problems started with colonialism, but most of them were accentuated by the colonial forms. Like I'm literally meaning the forms that they used to give, like during the census, like you check the boxes. Thousands of people for the first time, when they checked the boxes, what religion are you? They had to pick one. They couldn't say, no, I don't know. There was no option to say that I don't know what religion I follow, right? Because they went through a lot, like the early indigenous people of Bengal, right? They were certain speakers of different languages, like maybe Munda languages or Dravidian languages, and then there was Aryanization, right? And then they learned Bangla, and then Hinduism swept there, and then not this kind of Hinduism that we know right now. There was like a pluralistic, different groups, like she said, like Shakti or Vishnu. These are different groups that they worship. So they solidify into one. You have to check the box, Hindu or Muslims or Buddhist or like that, 5 or 6. So then they know that thousands of people are Muslims. They didn't know that Muslims existed in that number before they checked, because they didn't know what box to check. Because they were indigenous people, and they got land from the Muslim rulers through Muslim missionaries, and they worked with Muslim missionaries for generations. So they did not convert to Islam overnight. They were absorbed into Islam like over generations. So they, at what point they became Muslim, they didn't know. So you have government forms to fill up, then your identity gets stuck into one box. But other than that, you are fluid. You can be what you want to be. Like I am a Muslim, I am a Bengali too. I don't see it's mutually exclusive. Even if I'm not a practitioner, why I should let go one of my identities, right? So I always I don't vehemently oppose, but I wholeheartedly try to oppose that. Don't put me into a box, okay? Even if I don't speak proper English or proper Bangla or proper, don't give that proper thing to me right now, okay? Don't do that. Or proper Hindu. Even if I'm Muslim, are you a proper Muslim? Like, how far I can be a proper? Like, whatever I be, there is a question, are you a proper? So I don't want to assume that proper identity. I'm very happy with this like improper identity or fluid identity that I have. Yeah.
I really appreciate hearing about that. Yeah, thinking about like the politicization and formalization of identity is actually really interesting. And yeah, so much of what we see now of our culture and traditions is influenced by that colonial and pre-colonial history that we come from. But switching gears to now, I would love to invite you to talk about how you navigated culture and identity and just being a student in an educational setting as a South Asian, a brown person in a predominantly white institution.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I will say I have to backtrack a little bit. So I was actually raised in Fort Bend County, which is, if folks know about that county, it's one of the most diverse counties in the country. Well, at least it used to be when I was when I was a kid. So it was kind of a culture, like a reverse culture shock for me to come to UT, even though a large percentage of my district came here. So I would see like people I grew up with, like at the South Mall, for example. But a lot of my classes, especially like the bigger intro classes, were predominantly white kids, and the teachers were predominantly white. I remember, so I had to seek out like spaces where I felt seen, and it's really, really sad because I feel like the students now don't really have those spaces anymore because of the government, the state government especially, passing like anti-DEI laws, which has kind of done away with like these safe spaces like the MEC. The MEC isn't here anymore, and that used to be a safe place where I could go. There was always food. There's always someone in the corner chatting someone else up, and you could just join a conversation. Not saying those gatherings don't happen here now, but there was a feeling of safety and that you could go there and feel seen and welcomed. So yeah, I mean, in college, it was something that I had to really seek out, and I'm sure it's even harder now to seek those things out, but like taking classes for South Asia Studies or Black Studies. What else did I take? Feminist studies, like women and gender studies, was great. And I actually had one semester where I had all people of color professors, and Shamim was in that semester. And I remember posting on social media, like, I have an all POC course like this semester. I was so proud of that. But I had to really seek it out. And I think it sucks for people who are like in more STEM fields because they don't really get that as much. But I was taking courses from Dr. Kristen Smith, who is in anthropology, Dr. Simone Brown, who does like surveillance studies, love her, and Dr. Juliet Hooker, who's now at Brown. And I was just taking these amazing courses by these kick-ass people who were doing like cutting edge work in their field. So it was really a great time to be alive and be at UT and learn from these brilliant minds. And that really helped me articulate not only my studies, but helped me articulate my own identity and kind of who I was in the spaces I could occupy as a person. It just made me way more confident. And I will say I did double majors. So at first I was in government, and then I double majored in humanities. So my thesis work was specifically on sex work in Kolkata in a red light district called Shonagati. And so my thesis was essentially arguing where and how do feminine labor practices get compensated? And so arguing that sex work is a feminine labor practice, and both as in the domestic space and the private public space, how do we compensate women for doing this type of work? And so that led me to have just some great conversations with people. That's how I met Dr. Hyder, who really mentored me and shaped my understanding of South Asia. And I think I just got really lucky, because I know like a lot of people don't have the privilege of just dedicating their UT career to something that interesting and niche. But I would say if you're not doing like specific liberal arts work, try to seek out mentorship even outside of those spaces. I think something beautiful about UT is you could drop into any professor's office hours and just say, hey, love your work, great, big fan, would love to just chat with you for 10 minutes. And people are like really eager and happy to chat with you and connect with you outside of their classwork. You just have to kind of talk yourself up a little bit to be like, it's okay, you can do this. It's scary, but once you're in front of them, there is that sense of camaraderie, and the nervousness will just disappear. It's hard, but it's possible. So that would be my recommendation, is if you like someone's work, just pop into their office hours to see what they're up to.
That's good advice, and I think helpful for a lot of us as students. And I would like to get an educator's perspective on this.
Yes, so...
Shami's like, don't go to my office hours.
No, I mean, this is something like everywhere. You can, if you see that someone like you, in many ways like you, doing something that you want to do, right, or you aspire to do, it is helpful, right? So my son is 12, and he got this idea. He asked this question: can women be a president in the U.S.? And then it's like, why do you ask that? It's like every time he gets this, like with Hillary first, and then Kamala. And then he gets this from his school. He's on the spectrum, so he cannot analyze many things, but he just receives it and asks in a safe space, and that's us. So he cannot like challenge anyone or he prefers not to. So he's like, is this true? I said, no, this is like the reality of this country, that they think that way. So then I was like thinking, if I had a baby girl, and then the question would like kill me, right? So like, because she would like look up like, one day I will be the president of this state, right? And similarly, if you don't see professors of your identities or the background that you come from in the universities, U.S. universities, what do you feel? How do you feel? Like if it is like, it's like disparaging, like, or also discouraging in a way that if you found someone like from your background, like you say, cultural background, identity background, or whatever background included, you will feel, okay, one day I can be that person too, or I can go ahead. I felt that way, that to the education and also to broaden our understanding of the purpose of education, we need people from all spheres of life, all identities and all backgrounds here in the universities, because this kind of institutions actually sets the precedence, right? That this is how a society should grow, right? It was in the East, it is in the West, everywhere. Universities were like leading the things, the thoughts that is uncomfortable in the society, right? They make it like, hey, it works, and then it is beneficiary for the society. That's how you get a safe space, freedom of speech, and all sorts of values that you do it in the university to bring it back to the society, because society is not always helpful, right? And it is dangerous sometimes. So we need good educational institutions where you can create some like values, right, and also point of views that can engage in with the society and the big shots in the societies. They can engage in conversations and then create or broaden the safe space beyond the campus towards the society. And for that, you need different identities, different backgrounds, not just white-only institutions. That is very detrimental to the fabric of the society.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have a question specifically for you, actually. While you were a student at UT, you did a lot of advocacy work, right? What was that like? How did you get involved with that, and what did you experience in doing that?
Wow, I feel so old. I'm like, let me go through my memories of being a UT student. I was always really interested in human rights, and that's kind of what attracted me to UT, because I feel like there was a strong political, like, organizing space at UT. Like, so even at a young age, I was 17 when I came to UT. I just was like, where's the fight? I want to be where the fight is. So that's how I felt as a very young person. And then I think it was really just speaking to professors. I was just like, as you can tell, I'm a very chatty person. And then on top of that, I used to love like reaching out to professors and would just like listen to their work, and then like going to on-campus events. I used to be part of like the Be an Anchor, which I don't know if that is a thing anymore. Oh my God, that's so long ago. But Be an Anchor was essentially like you were doing feminist work, but you were like specifically like anti-violence work. So you were trying to support like people who were impacted by domestic violence, personal violence. And that was kind of a gateway almost for me to like do more of that sort of organizing work. Was it sophomore year? I organized, so the Dalit Women Fight tour was happening in North America. And so there were a group of Dalit women from South Asia who were doing a tour around North America. And so somehow, some way, we were able to, like, Instagram was really big at the time, like way big, and we were just like connecting digitally. And so we were able to organize the Dalit Women Fight Collective to come to UT, and they actually spoke at where the MEC used to be. And we had a great conversation about caste and how it operates, and a lot of South Asian Americans attended that, and a lot of them were from South Asia, were coming as exchange students. So they were from that culture that we were kind of examining and being critical of. So we had some great conversations with them, and they were just so great. Like, we went to Casa Marianela, they volunteered there, and that really kind of sparked a lot for me as a young person, to see that these powerful women, doing such badass work and like confronting the sort of unspoken, like the elephant in the room, essentially. And that led me to doing a lot more like advocacy work, attending protests. I was part of Azad, which is a South Asian chapter here in Austin. I don't know if it's still active, but we would go to a lot of protests at the Capitol, and we protested like AISD for they were like withdrawing funding for something LGBTQ related. And like that was after college. So these things really stayed with me for a long, long time. And I feel like you're right now in a really powerful place. Like, you're occupying a really powerful place as a young person. You have not, sorry, I don't want to like be really negative, but like, you have not been tied down by like the full burden and reality of the world. I feel like you are in this beautiful, transformative space right now. and that can be a really painful place, and that can also be a really powerful place. It can be both. And I wish someone had told me that when I was a young person, because I was so angsty and felt like I just wanted this time to end. But it was like the time for me to feel transformed. So use this time and lean into the pain, lean into feeling everything all at once, because that is where your power is actually. And you can connect with other people and collectivize and like fuck some shit up right now. You know, major movements in America have started at universities. That's what Shamim was saying earlier. That's why universities are targeted. That's why when the anti-DEI bill passed, there was such an over-compliance here at UT, because they know that that's where the power is. So be aware, like when terrible things are happening, it's also signifying that great things are happening here, and we have to continue to make those things happen. So all the kudos to y'all, because you are occupying a very difficult space here at this moment in time, but it's also like you have such a power right now to transform things and the way things are.
Thank you. No, no, I really think we all needed to hear that. That was incredibly inspiring to hear from you. And yeah, we are seeing student movement become really powerful in this moment in time, and not just here but globally, because Bangladesh recently had a student uprising and a government change, and I think that's just such an important, impactful political moment to talk about, and I would love to get your thoughts on it.
Thank you. Let me hold it. You're doing a great job. So students. So Ena was talking about, like, I wish somebody told me that, and I was like feeling guilty right away that I didn't tell her that. But
Intense eye contact.
yes. So, but to defend myself, I said I learned from her more than she learned from me. And she is the one who took me to Palestine movement, like Free Palestine movement. I was like, should I go? Should I not? Should I go? Should I not? I was like, come, Shamim, come on. And I was like, okay, let's go. And she led me there, and I feel good that I did that. Like as an employee who's like not tenured, right? You feel always anxious that okay, the next year they'll say, oh, you are not renewed, right? So many of my non-tenure colleagues, they don't feel good or comfortable to going to protests like this, unless they have students like, and I was like, no, come. And also I was involved with Azad here because of another student of mine, Jack Chacha, we call him Jack Chacha. And it's like, Shamim, you gotta come. Otherwise, I'm not coming to your class. And it's like, okay, let's come in the middle, like meet in the middle. I come to you, and then I felt good. I felt a community here, and also for my personal growth it was important. Even though I was when I was a student, a real student, like 100 years ago. So then I used to go to protests and also left protest, but at one point I was like, it is not taking me anywhere. So because as I mentioned earlier, like so colonized we are in terms of like isms, so we should decolonize our isms first. Like, so here I found a fresh breath, because talking about Palestine is not easy, right? Because your head is so much like bogged down with the things that you learned through your colonial education, right? So that gave me a new perspective that I knew I can talk about Palestine. I can talk about the identities that are getting quashed all the time. I can talk about Dalits. In India, I can talk about Dalits. The first thing, I should talk about Dalits. That's where I start, right? That's my universal identity. That's where I should start my journey with. right, students here did with Palestine, like camping in the campus. Now they are getting punished, but that means they did something. That's why the whole administration is after them, because they did something valuable, right? So that's, I would say that it's an experience to grow personally and also in a group together. And I grew with my students, with my colleagues, and I invite others who will listen to me. People don't listen anymore. That's another thing. But if they listen to me, like, I'll just share my experience, like how I grew, where society or authority or administration say, don't talk about it, I will start my talk with that. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've asked a lot of questions, and so now I would like to defer to the audience to see if any of y'all want to know anything specific. Yeah?
I'm just curious about how, I guess, the atmosphere towards protests and things were whenever you were here on campus, because, like, I used to be a member of, like, a couple orgs in the former MEC and, like, have participated in, protests and stuff, and, there's been a really big crackdown in the past 2-ish years on campus. I'm kind of, like, just curious to know how different it was back then, because I assume that there was still kind of surveillance from the administration and stuff, but not like on this level. But just what were your experiences or clashes with administration, if any?
I just from seeing what was happening at UT with like the Palestine protests and like the heavy police presence was really scary to see. I will say that I wasn't the person heading up protests while I was at UT, meaning if there were 10 protests, I maybe attended 3 of them. I was not even a permanent resident when I was, Okay, so you get it. You get it, right. So specifically, I was a H-1B visa dependent. So, my partner, my friends, they would all be like, bitch, stop going to these protests because you don't have what you need to stay here. But, being who I was, like, FOMO is so real. Like, all my friends are at the protest. But also, like, feeling like, well, if I don't go, then, like, who the hell will go, And so feeling a responsibility to do it. But to answer your question directly, I think they have been watching us for many years now. And I think while we were here, there was such surveillance. There was doxing of people, especially people who were part of Palestine Solidarity Committee. They had a whole website where they would dox you, and there was all of your info on that website, which was a scare tactic. Just the threat of being doxed was incredibly terrifying as a young person and we come from a generation of everything on the internet is forever, be careful what you post. Like, that's what was told to us as we were using our little Facebook accounts. But I think what I'm trying to say is I think even then, even though the police presence wasn't as heavy, the military presence wasn't there, they were still planning things out and watching. And there are patterns to human behavior that can be studied and anticipated. And I don't think nothing is by mistake. Like, everything is planned. And there was a plan that was being rolled out when those protests happened recently in the past 2 years, as you said. But the presence, the police presence, the violence wasn't nearly as much. But I will say that protests and organizing protests have a role in like the work of collectivizing, but there's also a lot of other ways to do that. And again, something that, I think my friends and the people in my community were telling me that I wasn't necessarily being receptive to at the time, but it's like, you can show up in different ways. If you are someone who's very vulnerable for whatever reason, you don't have to show up to a protest to feel like you've done the most. you can do the most in other spaces. Holding space at home where you offer tea, where you offer a space to talk, that is an act of resistance. A place for people to relax after a protest, or a place to make signs before a protest. Those are all ways you can support a movement. And I think within movements, kind of what Shamim has been saying, like within movements, we've seen queer people, women, poor people always be the steps towards this imagined liberation. And it's like, you cannot have that imagined liberation while using people as stepping stones on the way there. So that labor, unfortunately, has been undervalued, of like, let me make you some tea, let me listen to you rant, let me rub your back, but those are all important things, and we need those things in order to sustain ourselves. Or else, like, really think about how many protests you can attend before you burn out. So I know that wasn't your question, but I also did want to say that if you are someone who's marginalized for whatever reason, you don't feel safe, especially in this climate, to attend a protest, there are other things you can do to support the movement.
Can I add something to that? Yeah. Also, I want to, I think it's okay. It's just, one part of your question was like the experience of Bangladesh, the student movement, and also part to answer your question in relation to what Ena said. You cannot do all the things like alone, right? Say, for example, the student movement that toppled the government just recently in Bangladesh, it used to be called student against quota thing, the reservation, right? See, because that quota was, like, most of the quotas were reserved for a group called the children's or grandchildren's of the freedom fighters. Okay, so the question was, like, if you keep 30% of the job, a government job, for the freedom fighters' descendants, like, and that is politicized, right? And only one political party gets their activists get into government jobs. It creates an imbalance in the society. It's like only one political party sends their kids to the government jobs. So the student movement started many years ago, and then a student passed, the graduate, right? And then the new students come and take the baton and then go protest again. So it took like 10 years, like different batches, right, to keep the protest go on. And the last batch in 2024, they were protesting against the quota system or reservation system, not to topple the government. But the government reacted in a way that made it so violent. They killed like 2,000 students, and including general people. And then the army said, we cannot support you anymore, because the UN said, okay, if you support killing, we're not going to hire you for peacekeeping in Africa, right? African countries where there are fights, and then Bangladeshi army personnel, they're given job for peacekeeping there through UN. So from that, they get a lot of money. It's not that they are siding with the student just out of their ideology. It's just material gain is involved. So you don't know what material gain will be aligned with your movement. Like, you are doing a small movement, but it becomes big, and it topples the government because you don't know what other parties are looking for that opportunity to support you for their own gain. And then eventually everybody wins except for the fascist government, right? And that is what happened in Bangladesh. Like, students who did not want to topple the government, it was like 1 month long or around 1 month long movement. Most of the time they were like, abolish the reservation system, right? They don't want to abolish the whole reservation system. They want to keep it that are legit, that the minorities that are historically falling behind, so you need to do something for them. So they were aware of that, right? They want to keep that. They just wanted to take that 30% off, not just 30%. They said, okay, 25% off from that 30%, keep 5% for those children. We understand, we honor the freedom fighters. Let's keep 5% for them, not like 30% of them. That was their point, right? But it turned into a protest that the government couldn't stand. So that's why I would say that, and this 10 years of protesting and then other parties aligned, so that turned into a fruit, right? It went to success. So I would say that do what you, as much as you can do, right? If you burn out or if you get out from the system of the path of the protest, it's not helpful. So do less so that you can continue to doing. Like do one thing at a time. Like don't juggle with things and then you become tired, and that's not benefiting anyone, right? So mere existence in this kind of situations is also a protest, I would say. Like exist, that anyhow you need to exist. Otherwise they will just throw you out. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead.
I had a question more going back into identity. So I'm an Indian American, but I was born here, and so growing up, I didn't feel like I had a lot of ties to India and Indian culture, and compared to my other Indian friends who felt more cultured, I felt very inferior to them. But especially when going to India, I felt very disconnected from my relatives who mainly live there. So I guess my question, I know you talked a lot about identity in the U.S. and growing up and living here, but I wanted to ask for you guys to expand more, when going to India, how your perspective of interacting with people there with your American and growing up in West identity.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, yeah, I think that, it's hard because it all depends on the space you're occupying as a person. You're someone who was born here, raised here. So you may feel kind of on the outside in certain circles in this country, and then you may feel on the outside in certain circles in India. But I will say that, and this is something that I want to do, but every time I go to India, I feel like I'm put in a cage, and I'm just kind of in the cage of my family, and they kind of keep me at home, and it's outside is dangerous, everything is bad, everyone's gonna go after you. I don't know what country they're living in, but I feel like it's so overly dramatized. My ideal, which I have not done yet, is to just visit India, not tell anyone, go do my own thing. I know this would piss my family off. Maybe I never tell them I was there, who knows? But I go to India, I travel, I meet people, and I do my own thing. There are queer spaces in India, there are caste abolitionist spaces in India. There are spaces in India that, like Shamim was saying, are porous. It's not necessarily Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Christianity. There are these beautiful intersections. And if you think about it, your family in India might have a kind of idea of what America is like, but that those things aren't necessarily real or true. So if you flip it, there are things that you feel like about India, but those things are not necessarily true. And if you could just question a little bit of those assumptions and poke at them to kind of interrogate them a little bit, I think you would come to the other side with a better understanding of who you are in relation to the subcontinent. I would also say read books. I'm a writer, so I'm very biased, but, watch The Namesake if you haven't yet. By Jhumpa Lahiri wrote it. You don't have to read the book. I've not read the book yet, but the movie is great to watch. I cry every time. Watch Swades. Shah Rukh Khan is in it, so that's great. So that's always fun, but it's a beautiful movie. Also always cry. But there are movies that exist, like Bend It Like Beckham, also a great movie, that kind of show you how nuanced and delicate, bittersweet the experiences of being someone who who holds multiple identities and is occupying multiple spaces at once. I would also say, like, read poetry, because poetry, no matter by who, speaks to those liminal spaces that we can't always articulate. It speaks to this beautiful kind of living and experiencing the world that we can't always say on the, like, to our relatives or to our people, but we can communicate that. One book that I was thinking of when Shamim was talking is called Seam, Seam, by Tarfia Fezullah. She's a Bangladeshi poet. She's Bengali. I don't know if she's born in Bangladesh, but she wrote that whole book is about the women who were violated during the Bangladesh War of 1971. And she went to Bangladesh, did the research. She's born in Texas, did the research, and wrote this beautiful book. It's a chapbook. So just reading poetry, even, like, it will give you such a sense of connection with people you've never met before. So I hope that helps, but we can talk afterwards too. Yeah.
I think we had a question in the back. Yes.
Thank you very much for such an insightful discussion. I also work on anti-caste movement. I had a question about the event that you organized. Where the group from India, and like what was the purpose of their visit, and what did you do here, like besides, because I also have volunteered at Casa Marilena, so I would like to get more insight, not necessarily now but afterwards also.
Okay.
And also, both of when it comes to Bangla identity, there is this dominant narrative of Bhadralok, upper caste representation, which is homogenized identity itself, and it's largely an upper caste identity, I say.
Yeah.
So how did you belong to that identity? Did you feel like, did you relate with that Bhadralok identity? And if not, or yes, then what was your contestation? What was your struggle with that? And third is about the accent. So I have to teach sometimes here as a doctoral student, and there is this always a burden of performing an accent here, because I come from India. I moved here 2 years back, and I struggle, I wrestle with that. Since you are a linguistic, how do you navigate such spaces of passing into an accent, being in an American class?
Okay, let's start with Ina.
No, Shamim, you take it first, and then I'll talk.
Well,
About your activism.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. You have so many good questions. I forgot the first one. So Dalit Women Fight, they were essentially, it's been so long, but they were touring North America. So they went to Canada, the US, I forget if they went to Mexico, but they were essentially traveling to understand the local movements of different places. So at the time, the Black Lives Matter movement had a huge, I don't know if it was a resurgence or if it first started around that time. And so it was a resurgence. Okay. Yeah, it was like 2018. Okay. So yes, so they were connecting with local Black Lives Matter chapters in Canada and in America. And so that was one thing. And Casa Marianela was essentially a way for them to connect to the local work happening in Austin. So a lot of the people there are refugees, and they live there, they work there. And so they were connecting to kind of their understanding of what America is like so far for them, how they're navigating the immigration system, the police state, and so at the time, it was different, but, very similar. And the talk itself was like a breakdown of why Dalit as an identity is really important, how the Dalit experience fits into this caste hierarchy that is still alive in India, and how it takes from these really ancient Hindu texts that were codified and kind of revitalized in the subcontinent. So it was very educational, and it was a tool to educate people who attended. so that was really cool. I actually remember the BBC, there was a person from BBC Radio who came and recorded it, which was really cool. And I wonder if I could find that link. But yeah, that's a little bit about the work, but we can definitely talk afterwards.
Yes, so there are 2 points I'd like to touch on. One is bhadralog, which is gentlemen, or gentle people, where you use the term gentrified. The term is related to that. And the other one is accent, which are related. Like bhadralogs or the gentle people will have the proper accent, and the others, abhadralog is like not gentle people, or the people who were not educated in certain way will have other accents that are not very good. So there are 2 response to that. One is through poems. I'm a failed poet because I'm not brave enough to say what my mind wants to say, because now you'll understand why I said that. So my teacher, one of my teachers, he's a poet, and he had that problem when he came to the US. Now he's like a professor in a very good university. But for his accent as a student here, he struggled, and he wrote a poem like, excuse me for my accent, the sentence that I'm going to say next will not have a proper accent, but it will put the message across. The sentence is fuck you. So, and for some reason I couldn't produce that accent he produced when he said the exact same sentence. Now I'll tell you, she touched upon 2 things, like assimilation and integration. So if you want to assimilate, right, you need to go to accent reduction courses or consciously train yourself for. But if you want to be integrated, right, in this fabric with your language, the way you speak your language or your English, then it's a fight. And it's a collective fight. You are creating a space for the people like you. This is one way. The other one is assimilation, is a personal way, right? You get included in the gentrified area, you become bhadralog, right? With training yourself to speak their language, their accent. So one is individual, the other one is collective. So what you want to do? That's one thing. You'll have to choose, right? So another thing is, which is from linguistics perspective, the science of language, is even if you are not conscious, or if whichever path you took, there will be a middle ground where if you talk to people here, right, more and more every day, right, your customers are, or the people you meet and talk comes from a certain accent, you will mimic it without conscious effort, right? It'll take over you, right? That's how I lost my near and dear Bengali accented English. Many years I used to speak that, and then through academia, it came down because of professors, hundreds of hours of listening to professors talking about their accent, and also my colleagues, my cohort. That's how you lose accent. But that's a natural thing. But the conscious thing is what you want to do. You will lose your accent, the accent that you brought with here, along with, but through which path? That is a conscious choice. To quickly lose it just to get personal assimilation, right? Or creating your space, including others who speak your accent. So that is thing. Another thing is Bengali Bhadralok or that was a construct by the colonials, and then they excluded Muslims from there. Right? Bengali Bhadraloks can only be the Hindus, right? Only the upper class Hindus, right? Not the other classes. So that is because the colonial masters, they need someone to talk to from the native people. So they created artificially a group of people with their image, right? That, okay, these are the white people of this land, so that we can just talk to them. And then you need to actively challenge that right now, or it's not too late, because you know that another thing is like you internalize some white shit. If it, like brown skin, but your like brain is whitewashed. So you need to challenge those people too. And if you are already that, you challenge yourself, right? I would end here. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we have.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a quick comment, but yeah, on the subject of that, because I know it might not sound like it, but I'm faking an accent right now. I have a Nigerian accent because I moved here like 6 years ago, but you know, my experience is different because I learned it from media. Growing up in Nigeria, like I consumed a lot of American media, so I learned it from like literally watching TV. But the thing is, I realized recently that a lot of like other Nigerians who grew up here but came from immigrant households also had to learn to imitate the accent, and a lot of them learned it from, you know, being in school and interacting with other people who have that accent and just consuming a lot of the media. So I agree with like reading things, but also if you like listen to podcasts, if you things like that. And I don't necessarily think you'll have to lose the other accent, because I still very much have my Nigerian one. I can switch right now. It's not intuitive for me because I've kind of conditioned my brain to like, this is when I speak with my American accent, this is when I can speak sort of in between, and then this is when I speak just my Nigerian accent. And so all of those things, but it takes a lot of mental like ability to do it. It just was a bit easier for me because I was younger. I was only like 13 when I moved here. So versus you 2 years ago. And I've been here 6 years, so 6.5, which is also more time. But I just like, it just kind of gets easier with just hearing it more. But I will say that you don't necessarily have to lose your actual one. I think it's important to actually keep it, if anything. So yeah, that was just all I was gonna add to that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good.
Yeah, we had a question in the back. Yeah.
First off, thank you both for joining here, speaking and answering these questions, which was like really responsive. I had 3 questions. The first question was for Ina. What were some of like with the closure of the Multicultural Engagement Center at the MEC, what are some like, there's been efforts to like archive and like, you know, go over the history of the MEC. What were some of your experiences or histories or any stories at all with the MEC when you were here?
Man, I was so young and like kind of derpy, and I wouldn't always remember like the event names and stuff. But I do remember we did a really cool like potluck, and there was a giant, like we put these tables together in the middle, and we had a bunch of different foods that we brought from our homes. So we all would try like different types of cuisine from different cultures. What else would we do? I feel like the Asian American Pacific Islander Desi Collective, I forget, AIDPAC or something, they put together a lot of like talent shows. So I usually wasn't in it, but I would like attend and watch people kind of do their thing and be very artistic, and that was always fun to watch. And then honestly, like I think my most favorite thing was just to like come to the MEC, and like Rocio would be there, who now works at the City of Austin's Equity Office. And like I would chat, like talk her head off, and we would just chat. And the adults that used to work there were just so down to earth. and they were so willing to always listen to your crazy kooky ideas about like, I want to study this, I want to do that, I want to get an internship here. And they would kind of walk you through things like, okay, so then what does this look like tangibly? So I found a level of mentorship there that wasn't high stakes, it wasn't formal, but it was very accessible, and I would always just really appreciate that.
Yeah, you had 2 more questions, right?
The next question is for the both of them, but I guess I'll start with Shane. But it's when in your relationships with like language, and then especially like with teaching language, what has the role of both like dialects of Bangla and like Bangla speakers, and then also like you briefly talked about like, the homogenation of languages within Bengal and also Bangladesh. Like what are some like lessons or like key themes that you've been able to study or share, or like any directions you could, because I'm also interested in like learning and further researching. So what are some like directions or pointers you can give in like in your teaching experience, like teaching Bangla, and like just like there are likely so many students with so many different experiences coming from different geographies that have like different, their families have different dialects. So what are some things that your experience has like taught you in teaching?
Yeah, that's a very I mean, it's like very important question in a way that it challenged every semester, right? It was relevant every semester because most of my students were what we call heritage students. Like they come from Bangladesh and different parts with the different dialects, regional dialects of Bengali, and there are 2 things they need to learn is reading and writing, and also the standard Bangla, right? They would understand the standard Bangla, but they couldn't say it because they learned a different Bangla, a regional Bangla at home. So there's 3 things they used to tell me when they came to my class. And as I said earlier, that first half of my career, I was like doing proper what is called the standard language. Just this is the textbooks, and this is how you need to learn. This is how that's productive, because it's geared toward getting a job, right? So or a promotion in the job, right? Say for example, there is a test called OPI test, oral proficiency interview. So that is a measure when your employer knows that you you speak a different language, they require you to take a test of that, and then if you get a good grade, and then you maybe it works for your promotion or something else, or fill up the requirement. So in that test is very standardized, right? So you'll be tested like with the standard questions, with the standard dialect. So we have to train our students for that, like first. And then there are other movements too, like say translanguaging and also like just we speak one Bangla, right? It's just I can switch any dialect anytime, and that creates, like there are places where people speak that language, like Dhaka. It's a melting pot, right? People coming from different areas, right? It creates a lingua franca, which is not in the book, but in the mouth of the people. It's also a standard, but it's like a spoken standard, and people understand that from different regions. So now there is ongoing movement that they say that let's teach that instead, or not the standard one that exists only in the book, right? In the books or scrolls or anything. So it's difficult, right? When you teach, and then you have pedagogy, and then you have the body of work before you, textbooks and reference books and everything written in one particular dialect, standard dialect. So that is challenge, but you can do it. Say, for example, I grew up in different parts of Bangladesh, so I know certain like big area languages. So here I taught actually two dialects. One is standard dialects, and I also gave them the other form, which is like a colloquial standard on the side, so that they can feel that, okay, the language that I speak is not very much away from the standard. It's just another standard. It's not like a dialect. So dialect and language, this is something that people create things, but everything is a dialect. And the dialect with an army and a navy is called language, right? So that needs to be there, that, okay, if you want to learn this just to get some grades and pass or check some boxes, you can do this. But if you actually want to use the language in the practical field, then this is the way to go. You need to learn multiple languages, multiple dialects, or the dialects that are oral standard, that used in the melting pots or the metro areas. That, because you cannot go teach all the dialects. It's not possible in one semester. But come in the middle ground, teach the standard plus the standard that is in the street of the big cities. Yeah, that's how I tackled this issues that was persistent every semester. Yeah.
Yeah.
How familiar or what experience would either of y'all have, or if you have any knowledges about like any linguistic movements or groups or organizations that are like either within Bengal and like Bangla, like adjacent, or like non-Bangla speakers in Bangladesh, or like whether of any, if you have any knowledge of in like the Indian subcontinent of linguistic movements that like work against like colonial homogenization of like languages and that field.
I feel like this is a Shamim question.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, so this is also a question that relates to Bangladesh, like in a way that the existence of Bangladesh is pertinent to that movement, which is called Bangla Language Movement. And it started in 1952, and that transformed into a nationalist movement. And then through that, in 1971, a new country is born, which is we call Bangladesh. And that when the Britishers were leaving India, they were asking this question, like looking down, and it's like, hey, now we are leaving, but how you can manage yourselves, right? What's your nation? Like, you need a nation. So, are you Hindu? Are you Muslim? Are you Bengali? You're just everywhere. There is no nation there. And they're imposing their idea of nation, and then just how the South Asian parents talk to their kids. I'm so sorry. So Britishers were doing that too. So anyways.
It's a lot to unpack.
So that linguistic nationalism, I would say, even though it gave birth to Bangladesh that I come from, I'm not very fan of it. I'm not very fan of it. It's a divisive nationalism, right? Or religious nationalism, for that matter. It's just ugly, right? So, but it was a reality created by these people. Now, yeah. So what? I mean, pre-colonial India, right? Did anybody cared? I don't know. I'm not a very like a scholarly. I didn't read scholarly literature on linguistic nationalism before colonial experience of India. I think then it was a different time. I think, like people who did not speak Bengali, the Mughal kings, right? They encouraged Bengali literature, right? And people who did not know Sanskrit, also sultans, right, like Muslim kings, they encouraged Sanskrit literature. So that was, they are ugly in other aspects, right? But they are in the linguistic nationalism, they were not dealing that. They are not creating that. It was created during this colonial period, like British period. And then one is the Bangla national movement, and similar movement happened in other parts, like in Assam. The Assamese language movement was there, and also in South India. Okay, and still ongoing fight between like Delhi want to make Hindi the national language, the official language for everyone, and there is like protest from the south. No, we have our own languages, so don't like. That is, I think, it's ongoing problem, like that thing that one language should have one country, the European model, that created this problem, I guess. That is my take on this. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think no, yeah. No, I think we have time for one last question. No, we don't. Okay. All right. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for being here and for talking to us and giving us really interesting takes on culture and identity and language. And it was.
Thank you for moderating.
Yes, thank you. You did a very good job.
No, it was so great to hear from you guys. Yeah, I'm going to fix the mic. Yeah. Oh, I don't know how to do that actually.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank everyone, especially our speakers, for being here. I'd also like to thank the audience for being here. As our speakers have said, just showing up, taking up space is a form of resistance. If you like what you've seen here, please join us. We're taking the next week off, but the week after that, on the 28th, we'll be doing another one of these sessions and for the next 2 or 3 weeks after that, we'll be continuing doing these. If what you've heard here today is important to you, we encourage you to please show up. Taking up space, again, is very important, so please be here, demonstrate. All this is a form of community, and we encourage you to show up. With that being said, we're also going to flash up a QR code. A lot of time, and especially money, goes into making this stuff possible, so if any bit really helps, it goes a long way. Again, thank everyone for being here, and that'll be it for today. Thank you.